All right, welcome everybody to the PHLY Sixers podcast. I'm Derek Bodner, joined by a new host, but a very familiar host in Zach Berman. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk Sixers. I've been going through like fourth string defensive tackles on the Eagles show, so getting a chance to talk about one of the best players in the world is a fun change of pace here.
It is different. We're certainly in the middle of the lull in the offseason where we're trying to manufacture stuff to talk about. But for somebody who never talks about the team, at least at a professional capacity, it is a blank slate. And I think that's sort of like where we're taking our cue a little bit here. Whenever you get like a guest on, I just like to zoom out and get your thoughts on the big picture kind of stuff. We do sort of have to start a little bit with Team USA, I think, because Joel Embiid has been moved to the bench for today's game. Anthony Davis in the starting lineup. So they're saying it is just matching up. Team USA really doesn't need to try that hard to match up with South Sudan, although they had that close game not too long ago, led by former Sixers legend Mario Shayak and former Sixers legend Royal Ivy too as a
Yeah.
coach. But I guess sort of we'll start off there. What do you kind of make of the Joel Embiid's performance so far, both in the 5 exhibition games and obviously in the opener there in the Olympics? I think a lot of people would say he struggled. We have certainly said that as well. But do you read too much into that?
Well, I think it's the fundamental difference of being a star on your team compared to in a Team USA setting or even in an all-star setting, right? I mean, Embiid had, I believe, a 40% usage rate or thereabouts last year for the Sixers. He was a point per minute player, and it's a totally different situation. I think to kind of put it on Eagles terms because that's kind of what's in my head. Britton Covey spoke yesterday about being the wide receiver 3 in this system and said that when you have like ball centric, that you can't have a ball centric wide receiver 3 when you're with AJ Brown and you're with Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert, right? So to put that on Team USA terms, if Joel Embiid, and I don't need to tell you or your listeners, because he is just so outstanding and creative with the ball in his hands and the offense funnels through him. I think it's just fundamentally a different situation in a Team USA environment.
It really is, and I think a lot of people will look at it in 2 ways. Um, First of all, they will, you know, be happy about his struggles. That is the nature of fandom today, especially online fandom. You are going to do that if you are an opposing team. But also then Sixers fans are gonna look at it and be worried, like, especially now that they're bringing in another high usage guy in Paul George. Embiid has to go to a more, I don't say a facilitation mode, in part because he did that a lot last year, but in part because he's still gonna have he might not have a 40% usage rate, but he's it's still gonna be in the 30s. It's not like he's gonna be
Right.
a role player and a setup man. But also it just takes time. Like, it takes time to adjust to that role, to figure out how to make an imprint, to figure out when to really push, and run the offense yourself. All of that takes time to learn to grasp with, especially when Joel Embiid has played a certain style of basketball for 3, 4, 5 years now as the undisputed featured guy, especially in the half court. So I think it is one thing to struggle. It's another thing to draw sweeping conclusions off of. You do worry a tiny bit about, you know, the only, let me put it this way. The only thing that I would take that would ever concern me about this, no matter how much he struggled. And the takes might get annoying, and the struggles that lead to those takes might be frustrating, and it's on such a stage. But the only concern would ever be about that knee and about how it looks like he's moving. And it's tough because he is still wearing that brace. And I think that's always going to impact mobility, even if the knee is sound and even if it is precautionary. And it's just hard to know how much to read into that. But that is the only thing of the struggles that I would ever be concerned with. And there's too much up in the air to really know whether or not to even be concerned with that.
Is FIBA, and I've heard this for a long time, that there are certain players who fit the FIBA style better than the NBA style, or I guess their games translate to the international circuit better than
Yeah,
some others.
I certainly think, in terms of it's a more up and down style of play. It's a more spread out, more skilled sort of. Although the NBA has caught up here over the last decade, I would say the FIBA play was a lot earlier to the jump on that,
Mhm.
where shooting and skill at every position trumped even size and physicality and rim protection and whatnot. And where the NBA was still trying to shoehorn in two bigs lineups for a long time, and I think they got bit because of that. But I think for the most part, the NBA is trending towards that. It's really just a little bit more fast paced, more up and down, a little bit less ISO, a little less steam ball. But quite frankly, most of the NBA players in the tournament right now, I think play that style of play. I think the one person that a lot of people will point to that doesn't is a little bit Joel Embiid. But quite frankly, I don't even really think he has been too ISO dominant in these games. I don't think he's hogged the ball like a lot of people expect. I think he's just missed shots, made bad decisions, isn't moving all that great, yada yada yada, a whole bunch of stuff that you would be concerned with, but aren't necessarily related to style of play.
Yeah, and I'm curious too. Let's say now I have the game in the corner of my eye here, right? So
Sure.
if I turn, that's what's happening. South Sudan, despite that close call of earlier this summer, and as much kind of respect as I have for Royal Ivy, who I remember when he was at Blair Academy, right?
Okay.
Even before Texas. Um, if the US plays outstanding today, if Anthony Davis looks natural there, if the rotation just fits better, do you see a scenario where Embiid is kind of anchored to the bench much more, or do you still think that combination of LeBron, Curry, Embiid is what Kerr is going to want come elimination round?
Yeah, it's a really good question because this is certainly, and I know that the previous matchup between these two teams was really close, and the Serbia one was not. But this is a the opening night was a much tougher game. This should be a blowout if Team USA takes care of business, and it's easy to read a lot into that. But yeah, I could certainly see Kerr being uh, cautious about going back if this works out well. There it's just not a long runway. You've got to make decisions that you think is going to yield short-term results. You could I mean, the fact that Embiid was pulled 3 minutes into it the other night, I think probably says all you need to know about whether or not Kerr is quick on that hook.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, I do think Embiid could thrive in this environment too. To kind of get back to the original conversation, because he is so good at moving the basketball, and he is such a smart player, and there is versatility to his game, but you just look at certain matchups. You look at the flow of the offense. You look at it's not necessarily him being kind of ball centric as much as some of the other players on the court and kind of what fits best for them. So that's as you framed it originally, the with Paul George coming, with Maxi coming, I or with Maxi emerging. I don't know if it's apples for apples compared to Team USA, but it is something that I am absolutely monitoring.
Yep, I agree there. I still go back, and maybe this is just more of the um, journalist in me, storyteller a little bit. I just think it's an incredible honor for him to be out there with all of his peers, to have gotten to this point, to have a chance to compete in the Olympics. I know how much it means to him in terms of having his son out there and being able to experience that and represent his country in part for his son. Even if he struggles, I'm still happy that he gets this experience. And do I worry about the knee and all of the injuries and the wear and tear? Yeah. There's a part of me that thinks maybe playing in July and August when he wouldn't normally be playing structured basketball at this point might help him be a little bit ready for the season. But there's still going to be 6 weeks after this before training camp even starts. So he's going to have to keep that up. But the concern about playing at this point after that injury, I think, is fair. But that's really my only concern. As long as he doesn't get hurt going forward, I think this will be a good experience, even if he does struggle.
Yeah, from a conditioning perspective, absolutely. Now, what and you'll know better than me, what does his August look like, right? What is or August into September? Does he get what type of break does he get before training camp picks up?
Yeah. No, that will be, and I mean, he will obviously have some skill development work. He'll probably have some rest. It really depends on that knee and how much he can put on it. It's always been tough because he has spent most of his not every summer, but most of his summers, uh, you know, rehabbing something. Something always happens at the end of the year. It's really quite wild how consistent that is, and I do think that has impacted him. But he's also just never quite been in the kind of shape that he needs to be. Conditioning has always been one of his bugaboos. So I certainly, I'd love to see a renewed commitment to that, but kind of is what it is at 30 years old.
You spoke about the honor of him playing for Team USA and his son. I like this the conversation, the story you did out in Vegas talking to him about it, which, if I can give a plug, it's on allphly.com.
Yeah, I would have loved a little more time with Joe. It's one of those things where like PR is like, "Hey, you got 5 minutes." And like, "Shit, I've
Sure.
got 20 minutes worth of questions. Like, what do I narrow it
Yeah.
down to? Do I try to, pin down on something or ask a range of questions?" You get 3 or 4 questions, you wanna be respectful of his time. But yeah, it was fun to get a chance to chat with him. And I think it does really mean something to him, which is good. It's easy to, I think, sometimes forget these are people underneath, and that these are incredible experiences and they want to do things for their family and for their country. So it was nice to get a chance to catch up there, for sure. I guess any other thoughts on Team USA and the way they played and their chances here?
Yeah, I mean, I love watching Olympic basketball, and I gotta admit, even though it might be low-hanging fruit, I was curious about the Tatum of it all, right? I
Yeah,
thought Tatum was going to have a bigger role earlier, in the Olympics, and, I get it's pretty early on. I was watching your show the other day, and, like, I agree with every sentiment you had about Kevin Durant, and I think, whether it was the mess of the Sun season this past year, or just everything that's happened between Brooklyn and Phoenix. I don't want to say it's been forgotten, but I think like sometimes it can be underappreciated just how incredible of an offensive player he is.
yeah.
And it reminds me a bit of Carmelo on some of those teams.
Mhm.
What was it? Their redeem team maybe, or or if it was the 2012 team. But Carmelo was such a skilled offensive player, and given what happened in Denver, what happened in New York, it's sometimes got taken for now. I think Durant's on a different level, but I think when you see Durant in this setting, and you just see like the just the type of natural scorer he is, it's a joy to watch, and it's something that as like a huge basketball fan, admittedly, like I don't take that for granted, being able to watch him play in this setting.
No, he sat there and he took pretty much didn't practice leading up to it, because of the injury. He comes in and first action, he takes 8 shots, scores 21 points in like 8 minutes, and completely changes the game. And that's just who Kevin Durant is. And that's why every time becomes available on the trade market, a team will convince themselves we have to give up everything we can get to get him, even though it hasn't necessarily worked out. The last 2 times teams have done that, I think there have been extenuating circumstances around those. Brooklyn, I mean,
Yeah,
we know how that whole thing blew up because we ended up with James Harden here. Phoenix, I don't think the mistake was so much trading for Kevin Durant as it was then going all in for Bradley Beal. I think that was maybe
sure.
the worst third option they could have probably pursued. And certainly when you talk about sacrificing depth and flexibility to do so. But I think because of that, his legacy is going to be tainted a little bit. And is it warranted? Is it not? I don't know. All I know is that dude is a bucket. And whenever you need one in international settings, I'm pretty sure he's a leading scorer in FIBA uh, Olympic history. He is just completely unstoppable in that environment. He's unstoppable in pretty much every environment. But on a team with a whole lot of talent, when they needed a bucket, it was very clear who was getting that ball.
Now, seeing what they did against Serbia was, I mean, that was clearly impressive. But I haven't watched a complete France game yet. I've only seen highlights with France. It's hard not to be impressed there. I know there might be some home cooking involved, but with Wembyana's development and his evolution, which team, and I know you guys have talked about this, but which country do you think is the biggest threat to them?
I probably would have said Serbia just because there's
Mhm.
so much more experience on that
Sure.
squad and because Jokic is the best player in the world. I mean, Wemby is just a complete freak, and it's so easy to get him a shot in this environment. He's just so long and so skilled and so talented, and there's just no way to match up with him in any real regard. I do think Serbia is probably maybe not deeper. I think France might be a little bit deeper, but the top end talent on Serbia is just so much more experience. There's so much more experience on this stage and at this level. I would probably make them the biggest threat, but I mean the Team USA still, if they take care of business and play the way they should, I think they can beat either one as they showed in the opening game.
I do think that Canada has an interesting team. Not to say they're a legit threat for the US, but between Shea and Jamal
Sure.
Murray coming off the bench. I mean, they beat Australia by 10 the other night. Um, I look at that team as like just from a pure basketball perspective. That's a fun team with legit players.
Yeah, and they've got some role players in there that can probably help as much as he annoys pretty much everyone who watches him play or interacts with them or roots for him. Dylan Brooks, I think, is a good role player for that environment. They've Kelly Olynyk. They've just got a
Mhm.
whole lot of Nemhard. Like they've got some really good role players in there as well. Probably not
I've
quite outside
Yeah,
of Shea, maybe not quite
yeah,
enough top end talent to really make you concerned. But I mean, Shea's enough that he can put a scare in you for sure. I mean, if Mario Shayak, no offense to Mario Shayak, who I adore. But if he can
mhm.
put a scare in Team USA, then certainly Shea can as well.
Yeah. Now on Canada, I've always appreciated RJ Barrett probably more than consensus.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to see him in this round. But yeah, Mario Shayak, as someone who used to cover UVA, and has probably watched more Mario Shayak
Okay.
than the average consumer. Another Blair Academy guy, by the way. I am yeah, he's I don't think I don't think that South Sudan is especially good, but I do think that's a good story nonetheless.
Hey, at one point in the pre-draft process, he was compared to a poor man's Kevin Durant, and the other night he did not look all that poor. He
Now,
was impressive.
does Luol Deng come? Does he qualify as a former? Was there ever any trade where Deng was uh, was cap fodder for the Sixers?
I don't
Or
think
am I wrong there?
he
Okay,
was ever touched by the Sixers. No, I don't think he was
okay,
ever part of the Sixers organization. There were a whole
okay.
bunch of random ones who were,
Yes,
Andrei Karolinko, maybe the most famous.
exactly.
A whole bunch of random ones who were you know, used as salary cap filler. Who Danny Granger? I think Danny Granger at
Yes,
one
you
point was a
exactly.
Sixer.
That's
Yep.
Yeah. I might be conflating that one. Yeah.
There's a couple of them. Yeah, no, it's been a wild run. All right, we'll get into a little bit more Joel Embiid after the break, but first, a couple of words from our sponsors.
Yeah. Let me tell. I'm sorry about that. Let me tell everybody about as I pull this up here about Bet Parks Casino. And I talk about them on the PHLY Eagles show, and I'll talk about them here on the PHLY Six or so because Bet Parks Casino is perfect for after work get-togethers, date night, girls' nights out, guys' nights out. If you're watching basketball, if you're just hanging out, you can sip on tantalizing drinks and soak up these warm weather nights with good vibes right now at Parks Casino. This is how you win. It's the casino of choice that now offers an epic $5 happy hour with great food and drink every Wednesday through Sunday at the Liberty Bell Gastropub. You can enjoy $5 drafts of Forge Stout, Victory Seasonal, or Parks Pills. I'm trying to learn more about wine, but you can get $5 glasses of Albertoni Cabernet. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You can also enjoy the drink of summer, which is $5 twisted tea, frozen whiskey Arnold Palmer's, and you can feast on flavored pack $5 small plates of braised short rib sliders, hot honey chicken sliders, or rotisserie chicken flatbreads. The all new Parks Casino Epic $5 happy hour is happening right now. They also have 3,200 state of the art slots with 115 live table games, a beautiful poker room, plus a collection of incredible award winning restaurants. And they have headliners every weekend at the 1,500 See Excite Center at Parks Casino, which includes Tiffany Haddish coming on September 27th. You can get tickets for all the shows at parkscasino.com. Visit parkscasino.com. Must be 21 or older. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Parks Casino, this is how you win.
We also want to make sure we tell you about Indeed. Here at PHLY, we're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match, and match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work, use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. Just go to Indeed.com/AllCity right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. There was someone in the chat brought up a great throwback here. Eugene mentioning Jamal Mashburn. I believe he was traded for, was it Big Dog? I think it was Big Dog that he was
Okay.
traded for. And I don't think he played a game with the Sixers either. So they're,
That was the Randy Ayers special when Glenn
yes,
Robinson didn't
yes.
wanna play for Randy Ayers, yeah.
No, he
Always
got
liked Randy
benched for
Ayers.
Iguodala, which was a stunner, a complete stunner. Pretty much
They
ended his career.
I think Randy knew what he was doing.
Yeah, no, it was a good call. I think Big Dog then went to maybe San Antonio at one point and got a sniff, but that was pretty much
Okay.
it. He went from like a 20 to 25 point per game score to out of the league real quickly.
And
What
also
happens when you
he was the start of the rookie cap, right? Because he had that big
Yes, he
deal
had like
in Milwaukee.
a 10 or 12-year
Yeah.
contract or something ridiculous like that. He is the reason we have a rookie scale contract. That is a hell of a callback there, Zach. Absolutely, absolutely. Um, him and KG, I think KG got a monster one too. That scared a lot of owners, but KG was worth it, so you understood that one.
Yeah, well, I think KG's it used to be in because I recall this well. You could re-sign the player after 2 years,
Mhm.
and then KG signed the 6-year, $120 million deal after 2
Okay,
years, and so
okay.
then they extended the, rookie contracts thereafter because of KG.
I'll tell you what, like early 2000s contracts in the NBA were wild. You had 7-year contracts. You had
Yep.
it's just wild to think about, and how much they prevented owners from completely, you know, ruining themselves. It's there's training wheels on. I say that, but now I think now with the second apron and whatnot, and the virtual hard cap, or at least the more punitive luxury taxes, there's a lot more penalty for being stupid, which I think is going to make the next couple of years a little bit cumbersome because the cap is a much bigger part of NBA fans' lives nowadays. But I also think it's going to reward competence in a way that maybe in the past you couldn't because it was a soft cap that you could so easily go over. So I think it'll be fun. And I
Yeah,
don't just say that because I base a lot of my job around trying to understand that freaking thing.
It well, I mean, I'm biased here, right? I think you do it better than anybody, but it's the, it seems kinda hypocritical of me to say this on a Sixers show, but the concept of cap space was much more appealing then in those early I don't wanna say
Yeah.
the early years, but in, like, the mid-2000s, because, whether it was trading for expirings, the team still had the bird rights, but players reached free agency more often and and frankly with more effect than they do now. Like the whole, the big three era was
Mhm.
predicated upon players hitting free agency, and you see, it worked out swimmingly this year for the Sixers, but the concept of cap space, I think, has been of less importance in the last since the not the current the not the current CBA, but the CBA right before it. Previous to that, I thought cap space was much more valuable than it's been. And then Daryl
Yeah.
Morey proved I'm
Well,
incorrect.
proved incorrect, but quite frankly, if Paul George, if the Clippers give Paul George what he wants, or if they're able to find a sign and trade with the Warriors, like would Daryl Morey have proven you incorrect?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I think a lot of these plans are hanging by a thread, and you need a little bit of luck. And Daryl Morey got luck, and because of that, he's able to take a little bit of a victory tour. But he would have told you beforehand, like, "Hey, look, we think we have a 30% chance of maybe finding a star in free agency. 30% doesn't mean zero. It turned out that 30% became true, but 30% also doesn't mean it's a great chance. And I think even if you look back in retrospect, what the Sixers pulled off probably wasn't a high percentage play. It was an impactful play. It was the best percentage chance they had of getting an impact player, but I'm not sure it necessarily was. I'm not sure that it playing out proves it was high percentage. It just means that Clippers drew a line in the sand, and I think everybody sort of expected when you got to the deadline they would back off that line a little bit, and they didn't, and it worked out for the Sixers. But it certainly was far from a guarantee. And I'm
But
not sure, like, going forward, I think is gonna be fascinating because 'cause I'm not sure if stars are gonna move more, but I think cap space is gonna be more valuable for the second tier of
interesting.
players. Like Caleb Martin, like you can get him for $8 million a year now, where he probably would have gotten 12 to 15 in the previous CBA. I think that's probably where the inefficiency is going to come.
That's a good point, but from, the star chasing perspective, because I think about the years when teams have used the strategy and they've built rosters based on it. Like, you think back to the Magic, the year when they went after Tim Duncan. They didn't get Duncan, but they end up with Grant Hill and Tracy McGrady.
Sure.
You think back to when the Heat land LeBron and Bosh, right? The Knicks had that strategy. That the Knicks still land Amari Stoudemire that year, right? So if the Sixers did not get Paul George this year, they would have had this surplus of cap space. They probably would have had to trade for a contract because
Mhm.
the star players just don't hit free agency the way they did when the concept of cap space was more appealing.
Yeah. No, I mean, the rule changes will be fascinating to watch play out. There's always side effects that nobody really plans for, um, and it'll be fun to see which creative and smart front offices are able to exploit that. Um, all right, so I think real quick, one thing I want to talk to you about because I think it's we were talking about legacy pretty
Yeah.
recently with Embiid and how the only way for him to kind of flip the narrative, and right now it looks like through one quarter of play with Team USA, he has not gotten off the bench. That could be a game. Obviously, Tatum sat the other day. He's not going to sit the whole time. I don't think Embiid's going to sit the entire time as well, but the narratives and takes will be out there. And, the one thing we came at, he's never going to change the overall narrative, the overall opinion of him, the national opinion of him until he wins. There's just no way about that. And it always does get like I think about this a lot with Iverson and how much that 2001 run influenced his legacy. Because if you look at his overall resume outside of that, it's very similar to Embiid's. In fact, there were a lot of good teams, but the only time he ever got out of the second round was that one run to the finals. Obviously, you can't take that away, but that was also one shot away from not happening in the second round of the playoffs against the Raptors. It was
Yeah.
very like an inch the other way for Iverson. His legacy is completely different. An inch the other way for Embiid, he might have a completely different legacy with the Kawhi shot. So I was just curious, since you cover another team and obviously follow all four sports and have a really impressive encyclopedic knowledge of stuff that happened 20 years ago. I'm really impressed by your uh, NBA recall here, which might be why you're such a good fantasy basketball player and kicked my ass every year that we were in the Gonzo League. Are you still in the Gonzo League, by the way?
I am, and I've been building up for this year coming up. Although I traded some assets trying to make a run
Okay.
this year, it did not work out. Yeah,
John Gonzalez. I referenced this yesterday actually about Malik Rose. I took some pride in the fact that I beat Malik before he left the media fantasy basketball league. Gonzo has one of the most convoluted messes of leagues you'll ever see. Like you're talking about trading picks years and years and years into the future, trading cap space. It is wild, and I'm terrible at that because I just halfway through a season I lose interest in fantasy basketball, which is why I went cold turkey on fantasy sports completely. But hat tip to Gonzo for running a good league. That being said, I just wanted to bring up, like,
yeah.
what were some of the best players that their legacy was hanging by a thread? I was just curious if you had any examples that came to mind about that.
Yeah, I had fun with this one because there are a number of examples in both directions. So I'm trying. I probably shouldn't lead with this one, but I'm trying to endear myself to the audience here. I imagine there might be crossover audience, but I have to bring it up because to me, if you talk about like one game, one moment that defined a player, I need to look at Ben Simmons, and I
Sure.
I I say that because now I admit, and this probably isn't the most popular opinion. I was a Ben Simmons believer. Um, but you think like before that Hawks game, all right, he was 24 years old, all right, second in defensive player of the year voting that year. He was a two-time All-Star. Uh, I get it. He was he would not shoot three-pointers. It affected so much, but just in terms of the way he played at that side, the defensive presence, the way he moved the ball, I still think you could have built uh, and like I said, 24 years old, you could have built a really interesting team with Ben Simmons, and then he never played a game again in Philadelphia after
Yeah.
that Hawks game, and it is the him passing the ball to him not taking the dunk there
Yep.
is the defining moment of a career that like a two-time All-Star. uh, had, he was a max player, and all that's remembered now is that Hawks game. So
Yeah,
I need to go with that.
and he really like I feel like some of Simmons has been, I feel like we take away what he was because of what he became. He
Exactly.
was one of the 5 to 10 best defenders on the planet. Like, that was absolutely a thing, and part of the problem is I think the back injuries have sapped away, a lot of the versatility and the athleticism that made him so special on that end, but he absolutely was an incredible defensive player, and the court vision was true and legitimate. The athlete that he was at 6'10", and with the strength he had was a real factor in transition, and he just needed a base level competency at one skill set that he just could not develop. And I will always say that I think his biggest problem was more of a fear of failure, and unwillingness to work on the jumper and to really put that work into use in games came more from that than it did anything. I never bought into the fact that he didn't care about basketball. I think he was just paralyzed by this fear, and I think that manifested itself in a player who was fatally flawed and eventually just couldn't cope with that. It was really wild, really wild.
And so then,
But that era of basketball was so disheartening. It was so because there should have been a dynasty there. There really should have. Really should have.
and I agree, and because you know I don't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but when you talk about a player who complements Embiid, like if you had, that team that had JJ as a shooter, that had Jimmy Butler as a bucket getter, right? So like even Tobias fit naturally as the fifth guy. Like there was something to work with there, and then it disintegrated. But the opposite end of the spectrum, okay? If you look over my right shoulder here, I have a Nick Foles.
Sure.
There's a book with Nick Foles on the cover. I'm looking here at the cover of the Philadelphia Inquirer from February 4th, 2018, and I got to tell you, like Nick Foles. So anecdotal here, Josh Sweat wanted to change his number this offseason. He changed to number 19. He wanted number
Mhm.
9. Number 9 is not officially retired, but they're not giving number 9 out.
Right.
It's Nick Foles' number. He'll be the last player in Eagles history to wear number 9. Nick Foles going into the playoffs that year, people were not convinced that they were going
No,
to be able
I
to
was
win
a
a game.
complete I was completely on the other side. 27-2 was a mirage. I don't
Yep.
believe in him at all. Season's over. I was very despondent. Very, very despondent.
Yeah, and then he goes on in even the Falcons game, he did not play particularly well. Uh, the they get lucky, a ball hits Keanu Neal's knee, before halftime. Torrey Smith catches it. They go on, they win the game. If Julio Jones catches a touchdown pass from Matt Ryan, the entire legacy of Nick Foles is different.
Just doesn't
The
have he
Eagles
doesn't
win
even have a chance to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
exactly. The Eagles win that game. Foles plays lights out against the Vikings, and then the game of his life in the Super Bowl, and he's forever a Philadelphia legend. So that's one, like, his reputation is defined by that playoff run, that Super Bowl, and there's a number of guys on that team. Like you look at Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz caught the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. He caught a critical fourth down reception on the game-winning drive. The game-winning touchdown play, it was a critical third down, or it was a critical play at the goal line. He fights through contact and he scores the touchdown. What was the narrative about him going into that year? He padded stats in games that don't matter. He couldn't get yards after contact, right?
Right.
And he completely rewrote the narrative. I have a book coming out in September on the last 25 years of the Eagles. There's a chapter on Zach Ertz. Without that Super Bowl run, there probably isn't a chapter on Zach Ertz. So that's another example of someone who, like, really redefined their legacy based on one game, one run.
Yeah. No, I think those are both great examples, and Foles was one that certainly came to mind, and he kind of had 2 defining moments, like 27 and 2.
Yep.
But like I said, I didn't even after that, I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it at all, and I don't think he would have I think he would have been like the classic backup quarterback where everyone says, "Oh, they
Mhm.
should have kept him," and, "Oh, he had a chance and never got an opportunity," but he cemented himself with that title. The one that sort of came to mind to me, because I was a big fan of this squad, um, that Phillies team, and I know they won a World Series, so they all have their legacy, but I think they really should have been thought of as one of the I don't call it a dynasty because 5 years isn't quite long enough, but one of the truly dominant teams, and to have gone through the next couple of years and have some really bad luck in the playoffs and get 102 wins, and I think they even outscored the Cardinals in the divisional series
Yep.
and lose. Like, baseball is just such a random sport, and there's not even, like, one moment outside of maybe the Cliff Lee blown lead that you would point to and say, "This is a moment where, like, they lost it by an inch." It's just baseball is just so impossible to predict in the playoffs, and not being able to break through one time. I think they're probably underrated by quite a bit. I think that that squad and that era should be remembered a lot more fondly, and if they had been able to break through and it sounds a little stupid to say, like, a team that won a World Series is underrated, but I really think they had a chance to win more and probably get underlooked. I see a lot of people say like, "Oh, they won the title and they got worse every year." Like, no, I think they got better every year. It's just
Yeah.
playoffs with baseball is a poor representation of team quality because there's so much randomness to it.
Yeah, that 2011 team
It was so
was
much
probably
fun.
the
It was so
exactly.
much fun. You won
And
102
you
games to know every night that you just had a great chance to win. You were watching, some of the best in the world on the mound and still have that lineup left over. It really does. And a lot of it comes down to injuries and whatnot and randomness as well. But I would have loved to have seen them get a second one.
and I still like the image is seared in my mind of Ryan Howard, tearing the Achilles, running down the first
Yeah.
baseline
Yep.
on, in the ninth inning against St. Louis. To stay on the Phillies part of the conversation, even going farther back, Mitch Williams, when he
Sure.
was a 28-year-old
And
closer,
he was
right?
he
Not
was cooked. He had nothing left by the end.
by the end of the
Nothing left.
season, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
he was still yeah, but he was still in the prime of his career in
Yeah.
theory, like 43 saves that year. He was one of the best closers in baseball, throws the home run to Joe Carter, gets traded to Houston, and, like, that's the end, and it's I'm not comparing it to Ben Simmons, but, like, similarly, you bring up Mitch Williams' name in Philly, one thing comes to mind, and that's the pitch to Joe Carter.
Yep.
But what
Yep.
doesn't come to mind is that 43 saves on a World Series, on a pennant winning team, would otherwise be impressive if not for that.
No, that was certainly one first of all, absolutely broke my heart. I think that was probably the first time I realized, like, my heart could be broken and what that felt like. But everybody knew going in he had nothing left, and I think everybody blamed that. I feel like almost beforehand, everyone was blaming the manager, and then afterwards, everyone blamed Mitch, which is weird.
Yeah.
But he did throw the pitch, so he's what you remember. But that highlight will I turn the TV off every time I see it. I can't do it. I can't do it. All right, we will get back to talking a little bit about the Sixers here after the break. First up, another couple of words from our sponsors. First up, we're going to tell you about Coors Light. Between work, social media, and the choices life throws our way, it's no wonder we're more worked up. Coors Light celebrates rising above and choosing a chill mindset. Why not turn a rained out barbecue into a karaoke house party, or after a tough loss, settle scores with an ice cold peace offering? Make the choice to choose chill, then reach for a Coors Light. It's mountain cold refreshment. When the mountains turn blue, it's cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold layered or cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smoother finish. When you embrace a chill mindset, it's a good time to choose chill and crack open a Coors Light. Coors Light is mountain cold refreshment, crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly, Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. We also want to make sure we tell you about Mint Mobile. I do not have my burner phone with me, so I apologize for that. Did not come prepared. It's all right. We'll get through it. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between a store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new offering, get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/Sixers. That's mintmobile.com/Sixers. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Sixers. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower up to 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, so I had just a couple of questions here to sort
Mhm.
of, because I think we can sit here and when they sign someone now, we'll analyze them to death. And oh, it's a 14th cup player on the roster and a minimum contract, but gosh darn it, we have to put out content and we're gonna, pick apart Reggie Jackson or whatnot. So I
Sure.
think maybe some of the things that like we can sit here and say like, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that. It's curious to get the thought of somebody who is, maybe has, like I said, a broader perspective of the team. So one of the things that I think we have brought up a little bit, I think everyone was a little bit intrigued by what Adembona showed at Summer League, but also still realize that young players, especially at center, it can be tough to be an early contributor on. So outside, you expect Joel Embiid to miss 15 to 20 games. Very well could miss a game or two in the playoffs. I think everybody's happy with Andre Drummond at backup, but do you think they need to add another, like the 14th roster spot?
Yeah.
Would you go out and pursue somebody at that center spot?
I don't know if I would frame it at center as much as a rebounder,
Yeah.
because I
I
think,
definitely agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, because I like, yeah, I mean, if he's a center, that's ideal. But I think that it might just be Josh Hart getting off offensive rebounds like seared in my mind right now. So there's probably some recency bias attached to this. But even with what the Sixers did this offseason, and they reinvented the team, but I still think they lack rebounding. And so I mean, reasonably speaking, a center should be good at rebounding. If you add a center who doesn't rebound, he's probably not a good center. But what I would focus on for that 14th spot is someone who could help with that specific role, and not to say that a player you're signing to the 14th spot is going to be the difference in a playoff series for you. But if there's a situation where you're being out rebounded like they were in the second round this year.
Josh Hart
Um,
just grabbed another rebound. Yep.
yes, exactly. Yeah, the idea of having someone who, and I'm not saying it has to be like what Reggie Evans once was, where it's like a one trick pony, but the type of player who can contribute on the glass, is going to take up space, is going to box out, understands rebounding. That's what I would focus on more than anything else, because that is the Achilles heel.
Yeah. I think I would, I think ideally you let Bona mostly play in the G League, get some experience. A lot of those decisions, a lot of those coverages he'll have to call out. I think he can probably more easily learn those in the G League when he's given a longer rope and more chance to fail. And ideally, I wouldn't mind a center with a little bit more diversity. Like it's one thing to have Embiid and Drummond, and they're going to play almost the exact same defensive scheme. You're going to put Drummond in a drop. He's not really going to protect the rim. He's never really been a great rim protector, but he doesn't have the mobility, so he's going to play a drop, sort of like the similar coverage you would with Embiid. I'd love a guy who can switch a little more, maybe,
Mm.
or a guy who can shoot from the perimeter and give you an option to play a little more of a 5-out with Embiid on the floor. And quite frankly, just the people who play center tend to be the better rebounders anyway, so I think it makes sense to go out and pursue that. But I agree with you. Like if there's one structural weakness of this team right now, I do think rebound is going to be it. And I think we focus a lot on that as a power forward. I don't really care about a power forward so much. Like if you
Yeah.
give me a 6'5" wing that can rebound the heck out of the ball, that's fine as well. Give me more switchable perimeter players like that. But I do think rebounding is going to be one of the bigger, I don't want to say issues, but bigger concerns. Like if we're sitting here in January and say, all right, what do the Sixers need? Right now, I would peg a wing sized player who can rebound the ball as a likely need at the trade deadline for sure.
And doing so because you understand the geometry of this more than I do. Um, if you add the rebounder, how does that affect the spacing on the floor? Because one thing I have been curious about is if there are matchups where you could play Embiid and Drummond together. But then I just think about spacing, and I say it sounds better in theory than in practice. But unless you're getting someone like Josh Hart who's crashing the glass, right? Most rebounders are occupying the space around the glass. So how does that affect your spacing?
It really is amazing how every time the Sixers have a non-shooter on the floor, the other team can help off of them, and they're never made to pay. But whenever the Sixers try to help off of a non-shooter like that, he shoots
Yes,
50% in a series. Oh, I take that back. Like a couple years ago in 2019 with Siakam, they really helped off of
sure,
him, and it worked. So it not always turns out against Sixers, but it really did kill him in that series. It's amazing. No, I mean it's a fair point. I'm very big on shooting. I don't like putting non-shooters on the floor next to Joel Embiid, and finding people who can both shoot and rebound and dribble. Those players tend to be stars. Like when
sure.
you start trying to, have your list of things that you want to avoid, you've got to pick something that you're gonna die by. And it feels like the Sixers right now have just decided, all right, like if we get beat on the glass, we get beat on the glass, but we're gonna have good spacing, good ball movement. We're gonna have everyone can attack off the dribble if they need to. It feels like they're going in that direction. We'll see. Truth is, it's probably just best player available at the deadline is probably where they go anyway. But I do think rebounding is going to be a sticking point. The other one that we talk a lot about, I'm curious to get your take on, shot creation and playmaking. Specifically, I think a lot of people look at Tyrese Maxey, and he's even mentioned it. Like, last year was really the first year I tried to focus on being a traditional point guard or a true point guard. And first of all, I think a lot of people view him as that's an area he still needs to grow in. Hence why Kyle Lowry was a little refreshing towards the end of the season.
Sure.
But also even just beyond him, like there's just not a lot outside of that. Like Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, certainly not plus passers for their position or their role. Um, Paul George certainly was, but I think if there's one area you've seen him sort of show the impact of his 34-year-old age, he doesn't get all the way to the rim like he used to, and because of that, maybe his playmaking chops aren't quite what they used to be. So do you think shot creation, perimeter playmaking, is that an area we're concerned about?
Yeah, I like the way you framed it there because I think that plus passing, they don't have many plus passers, number one, and they are somewhat imbalanced toward guards. And so when you think about playmaking and shot creation, the natural tendency for I don't want to do a straw man here, but for many people is to think about guards, right? But you can get shot creation, you can get ball, people you can get ball movers from other spots, and so like I think about what, like, George Niang was. I think about the type of player Cody Martin is, right?
Yeah.
Uh, having that type of player who can move the ball is not, 6'1", 6'2" defensively, right? So that would be the type of, you know, player I would gear, there's so much attention paid to like point guard, point guard, point guard, right? I think more, all right, who are plus passers in a different
Yes.
frame than Tyrese Maxey?
100%, especially when the Maxi Embiid two-man game is so strong and creates so much attention and has so much gravity, that can overcome the lack of a true point guard or a
Yep.
traditional point guard or an elite passer. But what I do worry about is, you need good decision makers, quick decision makers, and good passers at all spots. And anytime you have a guy who hesitates, anytime you have a guy who, takes a couple of meandering dribbles and resets the clock, it just completely kills your spacing and it completely kills your ball movement. I worry about that more than I do. Like, would it be great to have Luca? Sure, it would be
Sure.
great to have one of the greatest playmakers of his generation on the floor. Tyrese isn't that. Because of that, you have to try to find ways to overcome that. One of those ways to overcome that is to have those quick passers and quick decision makers who can take advantage of Embiid's, the advantages that Embiid creates. And so many times last year, you would see players. I don't want to pick on him too much because he's not here anymore, but Tobias Harris, who would just get the ball, hesitate, pump fake, and all of a sudden that advantage is gone. and everyone knew that they could help off of Embiid because they knew that eventually that ball would find Tobias, that ball would stop, and the advantage that you were trying to hide has disappeared on its own. So at least with Kelly, he's a quick decision maker. The decisions aren't always the ones that you would ideally have, but he makes quick decisions, and because of that, it's a little tougher for a defense to reset. But yeah, I would love a few more just competent passers, competent ball movers, station to station, even if it has to be. You don't need elite level creativity, but I do worry a little bit that they've just got a few guys who are non-passers.
And do you see that coming via the trade market? Like, do you see that coming with KJ Martin's salary being moved, or is that the type of thing that you can find lingering on the open market in August, September?
No, I certainly like if a guy can shoot and dribble and pass, he's probably not available for a
Yeah.
minute. Although I say that dismissively, but like I do think the second apron has changed stuff. Like there's just guys available now for minimums that would never be available in the past. Even still, like if you have those three skill sets, you tend to be in pretty high
Yeah.
demand, assuming you are not a complete liability on defense. Maybe someone like of the campaign ilk, he can dribble and shoot and pass a little bit, but he's pretty much unplayable defensively. You might be able to find someone like that. But if they can hang defensively, then yeah, it would be tough to see them being available at this time. Probably much more of a trade deadline acquisition with KJ's salary. And quite frankly, if they're going to go in one direction, the rebounding that we talked about earlier, the ball movement and creation here, I would guess they try to invest more in the creation because it just tends to be a lot more versatile of a skill set going forward.
And the KJ Martin of it all is the fascinating part of it because him and I imagine the Clippers pick are the pieces. You need salary
Yep.
matching and you need assets, right? And it's what December 15th before anything can be done. So like what becomes available in December, January that you say, all right, this is worth moving your assets to acquire.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I still think there are going to be some contracts that were signed a year or two ago. Like I said, we saw a reawakening of what a role player earns now in the new CBA. I think there will be some trades that become available because teams are like, well, yeah, this contract made sense when we signed it, but it maybe doesn't make sense now in the new reality. So I do think everyone's going to focus on the stars and the Lowry marketing and whatnot. And there was recently Daryl Morey mentioned on the rights to Ricky Sanchez that they had approval to go up to $315 million in salary. That's salary plus luxury tax bill. A lot of people went to the marketing aspect of it, and could that be the trade? And quite frankly, if you get marketing and then max him, you're going to end up closer to 400 million in salary when you add in the luxury tax. I think people I should probably write about this more in depth, but like the luxury tax gets very punitive very quickly. And they made it so basically like if you're $1 to $10 million over, there's barely any penalty. It's like a 1-to-1 penalty. And then after that, you start paying $20 million for every $5 million you spend, $30 million for it gets real punitive real quickly. And I think when Daryl throws out a $350 million number, I think a lot of people go to stars and star
Yeah.
extensions when in reality it's probably like that might just be a 20 to $25 million player and more of a role player type of role. But I guess overall point is I think there are going to be some contracts that might become available at the trade deadline that you wouldn't expect just because in the new CBA it gets much more difficult to pay those middle guys big money.
And what I look at a team like the Grizzlies, for instance, right? Which I don't know what type of team they're going to be this year, frankly, right? You get John Morant back, but I look at Brandon Clark and I say Brandon Clark is the type of player who makes a lot of sense for the profile we're discussing. But like you have to wait to see which teams are contenders, which teams aren't. I'm on a text thread
Sure.
with my brothers, and they were talking about they were talking about Vanderbilt from the Lakers, and I like it obviously in theory and in practice, but what compels the Lakers to move Jared Vanderbilt, right? So that's why I in preparation for the show, I was scanning the teams that I think all right could be in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes and could
Sure.
have talent there in that $15 to $20 million range that you can go and acquire.
Yep.
And do the Grizzlies profile as a team that's rebounding this year, or do they profile as a team that's going to have to start over at some point?
Yeah. No, I really and you bring up Cooper Flag. Like, I think a lot of people think that tanking has been fixed, when in reality, I think it's just been a couple of years of the draft where nobody was really 100% convinced on the top end talent in the draft. And now that Cooper Flag is here, I think people are going to get a little bit of a reawakening that, yeah, the lottery odds might be flattened a little bit, but people still realize that the only true way to build a long term contender is by
Yeah.
building through that draft. It's not the only way, but it's certainly the best way. And you brought up superstar movement, how that hasn't happened in free agency or even in trades as much as it previously did. You've got to draft and you've got to hit in the draft. If you're not LA, if you're not in Miami, you've got to hit in the draft. I think a lot of people are going to be tanking and shedding salary and shedding useful players because of that. I really do think with this new CBA, on the one hand, I was thinking earlier in the summer, and I feel like most fans not understanding the rules isn't necessarily great for the health of the league. And I worry about that a little bit. And there's a whole lot of, is my team hard capped? I don't even know if they're hard capped. I've got to learn what a hard cap is, yada, yada, yada. There's so many different ways, so many different triggers for a hard cap that it really does get confusing. And as somebody who covers it day to day, it still gets confusing. On the other hand, I do think this is a CBA that will reward smart and creative front offices who now have a limited pool of assets and can use that a lot more. Like, I think it'll help separate the well run teams from the poorly run teams. And I think this is one area where it's going to, those middle players, and how do you find them and pay the right ones and the ones that make sense with your squad. I think there's going to be more movement with these guys than there previously was.
Yeah, I think the semantics of it, um, would yeah, I think the semantics of it is the challenge, right? When you talk about the apron and the second apron, right? But I mean, I cover the NFL for a living, and I don't want to say I'm an expert on the cap, but I think I know the cap really well, and know how it works, and really know what the Eagles do, and I can explain it to the general fan in a way that like sometimes is purely understandable. And I think that from the I think from like a terminology perspective, a hard cap makes sense because if you know you can spend up to X, and I think that's more understandable than you can spend X plus Y plus this contract exam plus you have a the mid level, the bird rights, things like that makes it more difficult.
Yeah, I guess. See, I think your guys doesn't make any sense to me. But then again, I've
Yeah,
never tried to learn it because I know like crossing the streams would probably just blow my brain. So I don't even
sure.
I don't even try. I don't even try. All right. So I guess last question here before we let you go, because you have been doing double duty and you've now been talking for 2 hours straight. Um, just what's one thing you're really interested in seeing? Like, what's one maybe a hypothesis you're interested in seeing play out, or one thing you're uncertain about that you think is going to be fun looking forward to the season? Like, what is Zach Berman geeking out about?
Well, I mean, we can go another hour on the things I'm geeking out about with the Sixers, but I would say first off, how they're going to manage Embiid as far as back to backs, as far as making sure that come the playoff time, he's where you want him to be physically. I want to see like what's the next step in Maxi's game. That's a fairly obvious one, right? I want to see what they do with that KJ Martin contract. It's I respect the strategy in
It's gotta
understanding
be
if
a
the max
weird place
salary.
for him though, right? Like, how do you walk in that locker room knowing that you're basically a human trade exception because the
Yeah,
salary cap is so convoluted that, like, you got a contract that everybody knows you don't deserve. Everybody.
yeah, but you're being paid more than it's like if you're KJ
Oh,
Martin,
he
you
agreed to
say
it, and I
this
understand
is
why he
awesome.
agreed to it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we all agreed
yeah,
to it. It's still gonna be a little
yeah,
weird in the locker room, I feel like.
yeah. That's fair. And so I'm curious what Daryl Morey's next move is. Uh, But also there's things outside the Sixers that I'm I'm really curious to see because I think the Eastern Conference is so competitive. I think obviously what the Knicks did, I got to imagine as much as the viewers here might dislike Doc Rivers, that the Bucks are going to be much better this year. With a year into Lillard. I read John Horst's comments the other day about it's not whether the Bucks can compete with the Celtics, Knicks, and Sixers. It's like whether they can compete with the Bucks. I think there are some ascending teams in the East too. So I kind of want to see where the Sixers. I think the Sixers can play with anyone. I think they can play with the Celtics. I think they can play with the Knicks. I think they can play with the Bucks, right? But I kind of want to see how that factors in, and then not to think that rookies are able to contribute in a major way. But I liked what I saw from Jared McCain at Duke, by the way, in the NCAA tournament. I liked what I saw from him in summer league, and I think that there's something interesting there.
Yeah, I'm certainly nowhere near ready to give up on Jared McCain. I know he shot like 25% from three. That dude is going to shoot. And I think once that shot starts going in, it'll be a lot easier to see the pathway of him being an NBA player. I do think he is going back to the point of probably not a lead ball handler just because he doesn't have the burst to really get into the paint off of the pick and roll or off of a straight line drive. But I think he's a pretty good decision maker and passer when he does get in there. So just having another one of guy, even if you're not giving it to him at the top of the key, even if it's maybe all of his drives are coming off of, attacking a closeout or whatnot, just having somebody who can make a good decision with the ball and has a little bit of creativity if he can hold up defensively. And that's really what, because I don't think he's going to create a lot off the dribble or I think he's going to struggle finishing inside because of athleticism. He has less margin for error. So that shot has to be really good. And I think it's going to be really good. I don't have too much concern about that, but the defense has to be able to hold up as well. That's the bigger concern, but he is physically strong. He's physically developed. I think, like I said, right after the draft, I think he's doing almost everything he can to overcome his physical limitations. It's just the physical limitations are there. So we will see. But I think I'm certainly I think he is a pretty smart basketball player, and if that shot translates, he will find a way.
I know all too well about trying to overcome lack of height.
Well, I mean, we've got Devon, and Devon, like Kyle and I have got 6 or 7 inches on Devon, but Devon will school us in basketball, so that means absolutely nothing. Absolutely.
Yeah, Devon can post me up though. So yeah.
I mean, I think Devon thinks he can probably post anyone up. He is not lacking for confidence on the basketball court. I think that is probably. I think we've wasted enough of your time. So we really appreciate you coming on, Zach, and we will be back in studio with Devon and Kyle tomorrow. So thank everyone for listening, and we will talk to you later.